Welcome back, in part 2 of Disney. Let's continue this topic about Disney.
In 1934, Walt Disney announced a feature-length animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
It would be the first cel animated feature and the first animated feature produced in the U.S.
Its novelty made it a risky venture. Roy tried to persuade Walt not to produce it, arguing it would bankrupt the studio, and while widely anticipated by the public, it was referred to by some critics as Disney's folly.
Walt directed the animators to take a realistic approach, creating scenes as though they were live action.
While making the film, the company created a multi-plane camera consisting of pieces of glass upon which drawings were placed at different distances to create an illusion of depth in the backgrounds.
After United Artists attempted to obtain future television rights to the Disney shorts, Walt signed a distribution contract with RKO Radio Pictures on March 2, 1936.
Walt Disney Productions exceeded its original budget of $150,000 for Snow White by 10 times. Its production eventually cost the company $1.5 million. Snow White took 3 years to make, premiering on December 12, 1937.
It was an immediate critical and commercial success, becoming the highest-grossing film up to that point, grossing $8 million, equivalent to $169,555,556 in 2023 dollars. After re-releases, it grossed a total of $998,440,000 in the U.S., adjusted for inflation.
Using the profits from Snow White, Disney financed the construction of a new 51-acre studio complex in Burbank, which the company fully moved into in 1940 and where the company is still headquartered.
In April 1940, Disney Productions had its initial public offering, with a common stock remaining with Disney and his family.
Disney did not want to go public, but the company needed the money. Shortly before Snow White's release, work began on the company's next features, Pinocchio and Bambi.
Pinocchio was released in February 1940, while Bambi was postponed.
Despite Pinocchio's critical acclaim, it won the Academy Awards for Best Song and Best Score and was lauded for groundbreaking achievements in animation. The film performed poorly at the box office due to World War II affecting the international box office. The company's third feature, Fantasia, 1940, introduced groundbreaking advancements in cinema technology, chiefly Fantasound, an early surround sound system, making it the first commercial film to be shown in stereo.
However, Fantasia similarly performed poorly at the box office.
In 1941, the company experienced a major setback when 300 of its 800 animators, led by one of the top animators, Art Babbitt, went on strike for 5 weeks for unionization and higher pay.
Walt Disney publicly accused the strikers of being party to a communist conspiracy and fired many of them, including some of the studio's best.
Roy unsuccessfully attempted to persuade the company's main distributors to invest in the studio, which could no longer afford to offset production costs with employee layoffs.
The anthology film The Reluctant Dragon, 1941, ran $100,000 short of its production cost, contributing to the studio's financial woes.
While negotiations to end the strike were underway, Walt and studio animators embarked on a 12-week goodwill visit to South America, funded by the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs.
During the trip, the animators began plotting films, taking inspiration from the local environments and music.
As a result of the strike, federal mediators compelled the studio to recognize the Screen Cartoonists Guild and several animators left, leaving it with 694 employees.
To recover from their financial losses, Disney rushed into production the studio's fourth animated feature Dumbo, 1941, on a cheaper budget, which performed well at the box office, infusing the studio with much-needed cash.
After U.S. entry into World War II, many of the company's animators were drafted into the Army.
500 United States Army soldiers occupied the studio for 8 months to protect the nearby Lockheed aircraft plant.
While they were there, the soldiers fixed equipment in large sound stations and converted storage sheds into ammunition depots.
The United States Navy asked Disney to produce propaganda films to gain support for the war, and with the studio badly in need of profits, Disney agreed, signing a contract for 20 war-related shorts for $90,000.
Most of the company's employees worked on the project, which spawned films such as Victory Through Air Power and others, which included some of the company's characters. In August 1942, Bambi was finally released as Disney's fifth feature after 5 years in development, performing poorly at the box office.
Later, as products of the South American trip, the studio released the feature Saludos Amigos, 1942, and The Three Caballeros, 1944. Which showcased the studio's new strategy of releasing package films, collections of short cartoons, grouped to make feature films.
Both performed poorly.
Disney released more package films through the rest of the decade, including Make Mine Music, 1946, Fun and Fancy Free, 1947, Melody Time, 1948, and The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, 1949, to try to recover from its financial losses.
The studio began producing less expensive, live-action films, mixed with animation, beginning with Son of the South, 1946, which would become one of Disney's most controversial films.
As a result of financial issues, Disney began re-releasing its feature films in 1944.
In 1948, the studio began premiering the nature documentary series, True Life Adventures, which ran until 1960, winning 8 Academy Awards.
In 1949, the Walt Disney Music Company was founded to help with profits for merchandising.
In the 1950s, Disney returned to producing full-length animated feature films, beginning with Cinderella, 1950, the studio's first in 8 years.
A critical and commercial success, Cinderella saved the studio after the financial pitfalls of the wartime era. It was Disney's most financially successful film since Snow White, making $8 million in its first year.
Walt began to reduce his involvement with the studio's animation, focusing his attention on the company's increasingly diverse portfolio of projects including live-action films, of which Treasure Island was the studio's first, television and amusement parks.
In 1950, the company made its first foray into television when NBC aired 1 Hour in Wonderland, a promotional program for Disney's next animated film, Alice in Wonderland, 1951, and sponsored by Coca-Cola.
Alice was financially unsuccessful, falling $1 million short of the production budget.
In February 1953, Disney's next animated film Peter Pan was released to financial success. It was the last Disney film distributed by RKO after Disney ended its contract and created its own distribution company, Buena Vista Distribution.
According to Walt, he first had the idea of building an amusement park during a visit to Griffith Park with his daughters.
He said he watched them ride a carousel and thought there should be some kind of amusement enterprise built where the parents and the children could have fun together.
Initially planning the construction of an 8-acre, 3.2 hectares, Mickey Mouse Park near the Burbank studio, Walt changed the planned amusement park's name to Disneylandia, then to Disneyland.
A new company, WED Enterprises, now Walt Disney Imagineering, was formed in 1952 to design and construct the park.
Drawing inspiration from amusement parks in the US and Europe, Walt approached the design of Disneyland with an emphasis on thematic storytelling and cleanliness, innovative approaches for amusement parks of the time.
The plan to build the park in Burbank was abandoned when Walt realized 8 acres would not be enough to accomplish his vision.
Disney acquired 160 acres, 65 hectares of orange groves in Anaheim, southeast of LA, in neighboring Orange County, at $6,200 per acre to build the park.
Construction began in July 1954.
To finance the construction of Disneyland, Disney sold his home at Smoke Tree Ranch in Palm Springs, and the company promoted it with a television series of the same name, aired on ABC.
The Disneyland television series, which would be the first in a long-running series of successful anthology television programs for the company, was a success and garnered over 50% of viewers in its time slot, along with praise from critics.
In August, Walt formed another company, Disneyland Incorporated, to finance the park, whose construction costs totaled $17 million. In October, with the success of Disneyland, ABC allowed Disney to produce the Mickey Mouse Club, a variety show for children. The show included a daily Disney cartoon, a children's newsreel, and a talent show.
It was presented by a host of talented children and adults called Mouseketeers and Mooseketeers, respectively.
After the first season, over 10 million children and 5 million adults watched it daily, and 2 million Mickey Mouse ears, which the cast wore, were sold.
In December 1954, the 5-part miniseries Davy Crockett premiered as part of Disneyland, starring Fess Parker.
According to writer Neil Gabler, it became an overnight national sensation, selling 10 million Crockett coonskin cats.
The show's theme song, The Ballad of Davy Crockett, became part of American pop culture, selling 10 million records.
Los Angeles Times called it the greatest merchandising fad the world had ever seen.
In June 1955, Disney's 15th animated film Lady and the Tramp was released and performed better at the box office than any other Disney films since Snow White.
Disneyland opened on July 17, 1955. It was a major media event, broadcast live on ABC, with actors Art Linkletter, Bob Cummings, and Ronald Reagan hosting.
It garnered over 90 million viewers, becoming the most watched live broadcast to that date.
While the park's opening day was disastrous, restaurants ran out of food, the Mark Twain Riverboat began to sink, other rides malfunctioned, and the drinking fountains were not working in the 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius heat. The park became a success, with 161,657 visitors in its first week and 20,000 visitors a day in its first month.
After its first year, 3.6 million people had visited, and after its second year, 4 million more guests came, making it more popular than the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone National Park.
That year, the company earned a gross total of $24.5 million, compared to the $11 million the previous year. Disney continued to delegate much of the animation work to the studio's top animators, known as the Nine Old Men.
The company produced an average of 5 films per year throughout the 1950s and 60s.
Animated features of this period included Sleeping Beauty, 1959, 101 Dalmatians, 1961, and The Sword in the Stone, 1963.
Sleeping Beauty was a financial loss for the company, and at $6 million had the highest production costs up to that point.
101 Dalmatians introduced an animation technique using the xerography process to electromagnetically transfer the drawings to animation cells, resulting in a transformed art style for the studio's animated films.
In 1956, the Sherman brothers, Robert and Richard, were asked to produce a theme song for the television series Zorro.
The company hired them as exclusive staff songwriters, an arrangement that lasted 10 years.
They wrote many songs for Disney's films and theme parks, and several were commercial hits.
In the late 1950s, Disney ventured into comedy with a live-action film The Shaggy Dog, 1959, which became the highest-grossing film in the US and Canada for Disney at over $9 million. And The Absent-Minded Professor, 1961, both starring Fred MacMurray. Disney also made live-action films based on children's books including Pollyanna, 1960, and Swiss Family Robinson, 1960.
Child actor Haley Mills starred in Pollyanna, for which she won an Academy Juvenile Award.
Mills starred in 5 other Disney films, including a dual role as the twins in The Parent Trap, 1961.
Another child actor, Kevin Corcoran, was prominent in many Disney live-action films, first appearing in a serial for the Mickey Mouse Club, where he would play a boy named Moochie.
He worked alongside Mills in Pollyanna and starred in features such as Old Yeller, 1957, Toby Tyler, 1960, and Swiss Family Robinson.
In 1964, the live-action/animation musical film Mary Poppins was released to major commercial success and rapturous critical acclaim, becoming the year's highest-grossing film and winning 5 Academy Awards, including Best Actress for Julie Andrews as Poppins and Best Song for the Sherman Brothers, who also won Best Score for the films Chim Chim Cher-ee.
Throughout the 1960s, T. Jones, whom The Guardian called the figure who most represented Walt Disney Productions in the 1960s, starred in 10 Disney films, including That Darn Cat, 1965, The Ugly Dachshund, 1966, and The Love Bug, 1968.
Whoa!
Disney's last child actor of the 1960s was Kurt Russell, who had signed a 10-year contract.
He featured in films such as The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, 1969, The Horse in the Gray Flannel Suit, 1968, alongside Dean Jones, The Barefoot Executive, 1971, and The Strongest Man in the World, 1975. In late 1959, Walt had an idea to build another park in Palm Beach, Florida, called the City of Tomorrow, a city that would be full of technological improvements.
In 1964, the company chose land southwest of Orlando, Florida to build the park and acquired 27,000 acres, 10,927 hectares.
On November 15, 1965, Walt, along with Roy and Florida's Governor Hayden Burns, announced plans for a park called Disney World, which included Magic Kingdom, a larger version of Disneyland, and the city of Tomorrow at the park center.
By 1967, the company had made expansions to Disneyland, and more rides were added in 1966 and 1967 at a cost of $20 million.
The new rides included Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, which was the first attraction to use audio animatronics, Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress, which debuted at the 1964 New York World's Fair before moving to Disneyland in 1967, and Dumbo the Flying Elephant. On November 20, 1964, Walt sold most of WED Enterprise to Walt Disney Productions for $3.8 million after being persuaded by Roy, who thought Walt having his own company would cause legal problems.
Walt formed a new company called Replat to handle his personal business, primarily Disneyland Railroad and Disneyland Monorail.
When the company started looking for a sponsor for the project, Walt renamed the City of Tomorrow Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, EPCOT.
Walt, who had been a heavy smoker since World War I, fell very sick and he died on December 15, 1966, aged 65, of lung cancer at St. Joseph Hospital across the street from the studio. We will continue about Disney in Part 3, to be continued.